because I want to get.
Looks like we're good.
We're live on YouTube.
Okay, well, excellent. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the May meeting of the Board of Ed Finance Committee. We have 3 board members present, myself, Dinah Carpio, and Suzanne Perschetz, along with Tom Hamilton and Christian Parchment of Norwalk Public Schools, and we can go ahead and get things going. First on the agenda, I will very quickly pull up.
Colin, did you want me to share the agenda? I've got it available if you want me to share it on the screen.
I've got it up now. I don't think it's super. There's nothing very different on it. So thank you, Tom. The first thing we're going to do is review and approve the minutes from our April 14th, 2021 meeting. Those were sent out with the meeting materials. I hope everyone has had a chance to review them. If somebody wants to make a motion to approve the minutes, we can discuss any changes. Diana, and seconded by Suzanne, thank you. Were there any changes, comments, feedback on the minutes?
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I didn't either. So seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
That's 3 out of 3. Perfect. Thank you. Next, we have the status update and discussion concerning the next fiscal year operating budget.
Okay. Let me kind of give you a little brief summary of where we are on the budget. And I'll ask Kristen when I'm done to jump in and kind of update the committee on where we are with respect to the school budgets, which we are working diligently with principals now on those as well. But just sort of big picture budget, last week, the Board of Estimate and Taxation on May 3rd did set the final budget for the city and set the mill rate. And the budget that they set was consistent with the figure that they had approved the month earlier that we discussed with you, which is essentially a flat budget for the Board of Education. The amount that was approved for the Board of Education was $208,468,385, which was about $52,000 higher than the number I had reported last month, because the city adopted a budget that incorporated adjustments to our current year budget. Which was appropriate, that they based the budget based on the adjusted budget, not the original budget. So the final figure is slightly different than what I had reported earlier, to the tune of about $52,000. But for all intents and purposes, it's a flat budget, flat local budget for the board. And as I had indicated last month, our strategy on how to balance this budget and finalize it for the board's consideration in June is to essentially go with the budget that was approved by the board in January, less the reduction that you'll all remember we were able to make to the health insurance. And where that gets us is a budget that I had described last month. I'm looking for my sheet here. Described last month as what it amounts to really a 3.8% increase in our local spending. So our local budget that we're tying back to is 216,275,041. And then in order to meet the number set by the city, we would fund certain items from the ESSER 2 grant that totaled 885,000, and the balance would be funded from the ARPA grant, or sometimes being referred to as ESSER 3, to the tune of $6.9 million. And that's essentially how we're going to balance the budget. And it seems, that was really the preferred strategy coming from the city. That was really the recommendation coming from the city. And so I think, that is what makes the most sense for us. We do have more information on the ARPA grant that has come out, so I can share some of that information with you as well. There was a briefing session for superintendents by the State Board of Education on Monday that I was able to listen in on, and so that was good information to get. One, we now have a figure, because you may remember there was various numbers that were sort of being thrown about, and we didn't have a firm number. Now we know what the number is. The number is $24,811,666 that we are going to be receiving under the ARP grant. So we know the amount. We know that the state is going to be sending out, well, there's a number of things we know. We know first, and I think I described this last month because it was really based on the federal statute. We know that 20% of the money must be used to address learning loss using evidence-based interventions. So the state has indicated that's an important consideration. They've indicated that a commitment to equity is important. There's actually in the federal legislation is something that's being referred to as maintenance of equity, which essentially means that as we use these funds, we must not reduce the amount of local funds that we spend to address our high needs students and their needs. So we can't reduce, so in other words, where we can't supplant, if you will, generally there is not a no supplanting requirement, but what we can't do is we can't reduce funding for our special education students, our high needs students, or other students in any of those categories. That would be prohibitive to then reduce our local effort in those areas. So that's an important consideration. There is a requirement in the law that provides that the school districts must develop a safe return to in-person learning plan. And remember, of course, this is a law that's been written for the entire country, and there are a number of school districts that have been in a fully remote environment for the entire school year. So an important consideration from the federal government on this is they're looking for school districts to return to in-person learning. Now, we've of course been with in-person learning since September, full-time essentially for our elementary students and hybrid for middle school and high school students. So for us, it's not as big a transition or as big a jump to, return to full in-person learning, but that is part of the requirement is that we have to develop a plan and publish that plan that has to be posted on our website and must incorporate a continuity of services and in-person instruction. We're required to get public comments prior to publishing the plan and taking those comments into account. and the plan must be updated at least every 6 months through September 2023. The state is going to be sending out what they're referring to as assurances to LEAs, local education agencies, on May 17th. And the districts are going to be required to return those assurances on May 24th, at which time the state will then make the actual application for the funds available. The safe return to school plan must be completed by June 23rd. And the superintendent has a working group that is now starting to work on that plan. Again, we'll be able to use certainly our plan that we developed in the lead up to the September reopening, but that will need to be updated and to incorporate where we are now and where we expect to be for September of 2021. And that plan must be filed with the state by June 23rd. And then the actual application for the ESSER 3 grant will be due to the state sometime in mid-August. And so that's kind of the timeline that we're on. Again, the total amount of money is 24.8 million. We know that about 6.9 million of it is going to need to be used to, in essence, balance our 2020 or 21-22 budget. And we will need to make sure that we pick items in the budget that are, part of the state's directive of how the funds are to be spent. Now, in terms of the intended use of this grant is to reopen schools and accelerate learning and mitigate learning loss. It allows LEAs broad discretion in determining those needs and encourages building long-term systems of support to modernize and sustain improvements. So we will be, looking at our budget and determining sort of what fits within the categories that the state has identified. And, certainly some of the things that we, might be looking at would be support services that address social and emotional learning issues, any intervention or tier 2 supports, math and literacy specialists and coaches would be certainly the kinds of things that the state would be expecting to see. They've specifically, identified activities that address the needs, unique needs of low-income children, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth as areas that are to be prioritized in the use of these funds. Professional development, technology services and programming, and anything that you can use various federal grant funds for under the ESEA, IDEA, Perkins, or adult education programs. You can also use the funds for community engagement and comprehensive planning and redesign. You can use them for continuity of services and anything certainly related to COVID that is continuing, whether it's enhanced cleaning services, sanitization, facility repairs, and particularly as they relate to indoor air quality. Those will all be items that are eligible under this grant. So that's, I think, let me just go through my notes, see if I've missed anything. I think at this point that is about it. Does this particular grant also requires some stakeholder engagement? So as part of the development of the plan, and the use of these funds, we do need to solicit the involvement and input from stakeholders as well. So I think that kind of describes where we're at. I think Kristen is really heading up our efforts to get the individual school budgets compiled. I know we've had meetings with a number of schools, and there's many more meetings on the calendar. I don't know, Kristen, if you want to just kind of describe where we're at and what the process is.
We've done a few schools so far. The next 2 weeks are loaded with student-based budgeting meetings, as Thomas said. The nice thing about it is we're using Teams. So that's one benefit that's come out of everything. Teams is really a great place where the principal's on, sometimes the CISD or assistant principal come on. We have an HR business partner. We have someone from curriculum. Tom joins us. We have someone else from the finance office, myself, and we really use it as a cross-functional team to address all the issues. So by the time we're completed with the meeting, we're balanced out. The principal's able to get all of their questions answered. We're gearing up for posting. We have all the information, and Munis is captured everything they need, the PCNs, the funding, etc. We look at not only local funding, but we look at the grants, we look at central office and how that impacts the schools. And we go into a lot of detail, and then we roll it all up at the end and make sure it balances out. So as we move school through school, by the time we're done with that, the entire budget will balance out. We do look at enrollment, so that determines, based on the demographer's projections, how many class sections we need, and that verifies that. I mean, one of the sticking points is always kindergarten, especially now in the middle of a pandemic. That's the wild card, I guess, for enrollment and how many sections you would need. But we base number of classroom teachers on that. We're looking to add math and literacy coaches within the local budget. And as we work through, we could see if the schools can afford that. We have the reading, writing improvement teachers, which are funded from the ESSER 2 grant across the district. So that's nice. And, we look at our Title I allocations, our special education budgets. And so we have the whole picture. And then once we've gotten the rosters done and that tied up, we look at all the non-wage accounts. Like, do we need instructional equipment? How much supplies do we need? Have we gone digital and we don't need some of the consumables? And we do really talk about every line item. And then we, make sure we tie to the per pupil, which is based on the per pupil allocation for the level multiplied by the demographer's projection. So it's, a 2-hour meeting with a cross-functional team, and we do some prep work ahead of time. So hopefully by the time the principal leaves, everything's tied up and, they can report back to their SGC. So we're part of the way through. We got a few more weeks of work to do.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So I think that pretty well brings you up to date as to where we're at on the budget. And our objective is to come back to the Finance Committee next month in June with the school budgets tied up and, final budget for you to review and then send on to the board for adoption in June. One thing that we've decided the easiest way to handle this $6.9 million that we're going to be moving off to the ESSER 3 grant is, for the time being, to just put that in as a negative number in our local budget. So we tie back to the approved amount in the city budget, but it's going to take several more weeks, probably beyond the June budget adoption date, to figure out exactly which items we would be moving over to the ESSER 3 grant. And since that application isn't due until mid-August, there's not, really a rush to get that done for June. In fact, they're not even releasing the application until the end of May. And And, so it really, they're not expecting you to have an application in by June 10th or whatever. So right now, the easiest way for us to handle that is to just have this negative number that we carry in the budget. And then when we move these items over to the ESSER grant that are currently being, carried in the local budget, then everything will balance. So.
Well, I thank you, Tom and Kristen. I think it's helpful to have some more guidelines around what we're calling ESSER 3 and how we can actually use it. I actually like the idea of having that negative number in the budget that we approve, because, well, it shows that, that how much is not being funded by the city.
Right.
And I want to open it up to questions, but just a couple just to start, just to so I understand. My initial concept of what the ESSER funding was going to offer to Newark Public Schools was around $27 million, and now you're saying it's just under 25. Is there any explanation for that variance?
Not really. I mean, my understanding is the number comes out of essentially they use the same formula as the Title I grant, and it's a matter of how much money is available. I had seen several different numbers. I had seen one number that was less than the 24.8 million. I had seen one that was 22.9 million. And then I had seen one at 27 point something, and I had seen one at 30 million. But none of them, were final. None of them were official. One of the explanations possibly for some of these variances are that the state skims off a portion. They're allowed to skim off. Maybe skim is a word that maybe the state would not like that word, but there a certain portion of the grant allocation the state keeps for their own purposes, both to cover expenses they may have at the state level, and they are also funding some additional initiatives, and some of these initiatives may be open to us. So one of the initiatives they were funding was additional summer programming that originally it looked like we may be able to apply for, but then it turned out that was actually reserved for smaller organizations. But I think I'd heard the superintendent suggest, actually I see the superintendent has joined the meeting, so maybe she can confirm, but there may be some sort of partnership with the Maritime Aquarium or something going on relative to that particular pot of money. And I believe there's several other smaller pots of money that the state has that they may be making available for specific purposes with these funds. So again, a portion of the ESSER money, and it's a relatively small portion. The state is required to send the vast majority of the money on through to local education agencies, but there is a small portion that they're allowed to reserve for state purposes. And again, I see the superintendent's here. I don't know if she wants to comment on that. Or she may be tied up and, maybe multitasking with multiple meetings at the same time, possibly.
It's
so
the blessing and the curse.
Yes.
And well, as a follow-up, Tom, do you know, my understanding is that the money was going to be dispersed over 2 years.
Oh, that's a good point. It's actually more than 2 years.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's 3 years. So these funds have to be fully expended by September 2024. So
Okay.
ESSER 2 runs until September 2023. ESSER 3 runs until September 2024. So we would have essentially the 21-22 school year, 22-23 school year, and 23-24 school year. And then basically the time from June to September is kind of cleaning everything up, more or less. So we've got three school years.
Well, that's a small relief.
Yeah.
My question was, do we know if it's
the amount of money hasn't gone up by a third, so
No.
stretch it out over a longer period. But
well, and that was the second part of my question. Do we know if it's an equal disbursement per year, or is it stacked towards the beginning or the end?
I believe that most of the funds become available essentially immediately.
Okay.
Is my understanding. That there may be some small portion that's held off to the second year, but I think if we had things that we wanted to spend it on and felt were appropriate and necessary to spend it on, and you wanted to spend it all in 1 year, I don't think there's anything that would necessarily prevent you from doing that.
I see. It's just it just has a deadline by which
Right.
you have.
It just has a deadline that the grant will only be, if you don't spend all the money by September 2024, then you're going to have to, it'll go back to the federal government.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
Tom, I have two small questions, or maybe not small ones. I know on the curriculum committee, we were also talking about the summer camps and enrichment and opportunities for kids for not only learning loss, but also re-engaging in school. Does that mean that those funds are in jeopardy?
What funds are we talking about?
I mean, I thought that when we had a discussion that part of that was going to come from some of this relief money, but if it's not available until August, that'll just be paid for out of the local budget.
Oh, no, you can, after we return this assurance on May 24th, any expenses after May 24th can be claimed.
Okay.
In fact, I've seen some documentation that suggests you can go back to March of 2020, but the state said in their briefing to the superintendents this week, they had suggested that once you've returned your assurance to the state on the 24th, you can essentially start spending the money, even though we won't have an approved application and we won't have the actual cash in hand, but any expenses that we incur could be reimbursed going back to the 24th.
Okay. And the other question, have they given any guidance on stakeholder input? I mean, how quickly does that have to happen for either prior to August 23rd? Is that part of that plan? If you're spending money on things that are happening this summer, do we need to get stakeholders?
Yeah, we need some stakeholder engagement relative to the plan, the safe return to in-person learning plan that has to be filed with the state by the 23rd of June. So we're going to need some stakeholder engagement. Now that may be, a public hearing, that the board holds, or that the finance committee. We haven't figured out what form this is going to take yet, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, it does. We do have to have meaningful stakeholder engagement. So, but if they've only given us a month to get this all done, I'm not sure how much they can really demand, but certainly there would need to be some kind of public hearing where stakeholders are allowed to present their ideas and comment on whatever preliminary things we may have put out. So
it feels like time is of the essence for that, right?
Yeah, I think we'll probably have to incorporate this into either the finance committee or the board workshop meeting coming up in June. I would think, and then in terms of, we'll have to get a little more clarity in terms of how far that stakeholder engagement requirement extends. Whether or not, I know it relates to the safe return to in-person learning plan, but I don't know whether or not we have to also gather stakeholder engagement and input before we file the actual application in August. We haven't actually received the state's application package. I sat in on this briefing for the superintendents a couple of days ago, but there'll probably be more guidance that will be in the written application package that the state sends out.
Okay, thank you.
Diana, any questions?
No questions, but thank you for that detailed explanation on that. And you said June 23rd, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And we always have the option too, I think, of if we need to schedule a special meeting, a special hearing, I think we can do that within the approved guidelines of how much notice we need to give if need be.
Right.
I just want to clarify. So it sounds like from what you described, for example, like using some of these funds to make sure that we have proper air filtration systems and so on, that we can use these for capital expenses as well.
Yes, that's my understanding. Yes.
Great. And Kristen, I just want to say that I'm so glad that, again, the double-edged sword of being able to use Teams for some of these school-based budget meetings has allowed more people to be, directly involved. Do you know, and we may not know this yet. My understanding is that because of the latest guidelines regarding COVID business restrictions, most of which end on May 19th, public meetings like this are going to require an in-person public component after May 19th, unless otherwise noted. Do you know if that counts for like those school budget meetings, or can we continue to use Teams? Because it sounds like something we should continue to do.
Yeah, we would be able to continue to use Teams because unlike this meeting, which is a public meeting under FOI and all the FOI rules apply, our budget meetings are really staff meetings. They're not meetings of a public agency, so they're not subject to the same FOI requirements. So I'm quite sure we would continue to be able to use Teams as a platform for those internal staff meetings. And I think it's a great way to, get the work done because, the principals then don't have to leave their building, so if an emergency comes up, they're right where they need to be, not over here at central office. And other folks, it works really well that, we'll have some folks from special ed jump in on the meetings for, a short period of time, and then they can leave. But then if a question comes up later, we can call them back. And it's just a lot easier to do it on Teams than it is to do in person, frankly.
Right, and we actually share the budget file. I'll drive that and share that, and we'll actually fill it out and have the answer live, like we're balanced,
Yes.
make changes. We'll look stuff up in Munis, and everyone gets to see the same thing. So that's nice.
In real time.
Yep, in real time. No more
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah.
That's great.
Plus, there's a chance to build capacity with staff that may not know about the budget, where you can include them when you're in your own building versus bringing two people out of the building. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully we can continue that.
No, that is a benefit.
Take them where we can get them.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's one of the real benefits coming out of the pandemic is now, these tools, I guess, were there, but we didn't have, not everyone had access to them, number one. And we just, not that many people were using them, but now there's lots, everyone's using them. And there are a lot of cases where it makes perfectly good sense to be having your meeting, online.
Yeah, sounds like this is one. So I'm so glad. All right. If there's no other comments or questions, we can move on to the next agenda item. Again, thanks, Tom and Kristen. It's really good to get some clarity on SR 3. Next, we have the budget transfers for May.
So Kristen, you want to take these, or are you good?
I can run through them. Do you want to share it? I don't know if someone has the packet, or do you want me to?
I can share them.
Okay.
I think if I let's see.
I made both of you co-hosts, so either one of you can share. It's up to you.
Okay, I just have to find where it must be this one, hopefully. No, I don't know what I just shared, but that doesn't seem to be it. Huh? I thought I had this.
Live demo.
Yeah, I had it open and now I can't find it. I don't know
I think
why.
it's in the tab next to that, Tom. It looked like that
Was it there?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't. Oh, maybe it's weird, huh? Hold on. Let's see if I can. Oh, you're right. There it is. Okay, it was the tab next to it. Okay, I think it's this one. Is that right?
Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
Let's see. I don't know if you can read these.
Yep.
I can.
So the first transfer is the shift of funds from transportation to human resources, and we're shifting $60,000 from transportation that we use less buses due to COVID throughout the year, and the intern cost is for Sacred Heart, University of Bridgeport, and Fairfield University to pay that. Just a change in budgeting assumptions. The second one is at Merrimack. It's $91,264. It's for a teacher vacancy that had funding left because it was being covered by a substitute, and it's being transferred into the instructional equipment line to fund collaborative seating for indoor-outdoor learning spaces at Merrimack, as I said. The next one for $25,000 is to cover the cost for travel for the facilities department. Part of that was a budgeting assumption change, and it's taking the funding from professional development to the travel account. The next one was a shift from other professional and facilities to the general supply account. And the next set, 6 transfers were budgeting assumptions essentially, and it was just cleaning up the utilities accounts in electric, oil, etc. within each of the locations. So really it's just an adjustment to the project line or a shift from, location to location. So the first one, for example, is $15,000 in the gas account, moving money from Nathan Hale to West Rocks within facilities. So it's not really affecting the school. The next one, $105,000 for electricity adjustment, $44,000 for oil, location only, $79,000 because we were using the Briggs location during COVID and support there. Next one is $78,000 for gas and $209,000 just a shifting within facilities to Norwalk High to cover the gas account. So nothing really changed driving up prices or costs or anything. It's just more of a budgeting assumption change. The next one for $105,000 and $20,000 is shifting funding to cover instructional equipment, Usonics, document equipment, and other upgrades at Norwalk High School. And people are using their funds to purchase items that they need to keep us digital. The next one, $115,000, is shifting from the curriculum PD account to the curriculum instructional supply account to support lit curriculum, curriculum, sorry, tongue twister, program That's related to scholastic materials. The next one, 110,992, is the outsourcing of the Marvin custodians that happened a few months ago, and that's shifting funds from the 124 payroll account to the 400 outsource account. The last one listed is 132,000, and we're taking funding from various accounts in the HR department to shift it to unemployment to cover unemployment costs that were increased due to COVID.
So
I
the
don't know
first
if
thing,
there's any questions?
well, the first question is, can you say lift camp curriculum 10 times fast?
Right? No.
Good answer. I have a question just to start us off, and then we'll see Suzanne and Diana. In terms of the way, and I understand that some of the assumptions we made about these energy costs were a little off, and now we're correcting the actuals. Is there a change that we may want to think about in terms of how we make these assumptions going forward, or is that just kind of the natural, variances between, this was a really bad winter, or commodities costs changed, or something else?
Well, I think it's probably a variety of factors. On PONUS, it probably is related to the opening of the new building and the fact that we didn't have any history to base our projections on in that case. So that accounts for at least one of them on this list. Some of the others, I guess it looks like the gas accounts in particular. I think maybe we can go back and look to see how these natural gas numbers were derived. I think one of the things, it's still fairly new that we are tracking these accounts by location. Historically, we had one district-wide account for gas, one district-wide account for electricity, and so on. The problem with that is that the state actually requires us to allocate essentially all of our expenses by location. So if we don't actually charge expenses by location, then when we go to file the EFS report at the end of the year, we have to build basically a model that allocates these expenses to the various schools anyway, because the state requires that the expenses be reported by location. Now, it's acceptable to do it via a model, so it's not as if we can't do it that way, but we thought it made more sense to actually capture the expense by location and report the actual by location. But we're still sort of, I don't know, Kristen, do you remember when we made that change? Was it last year, or?
I think last year.
Was it last year? I don't remember.
And right, it was always budgeted in account 60, which was total facilities. And as the facilities department has broken it out, it's been done mid-year. There's no history to look at to base it on. So it's kind of adjusting it as we go. And then hopefully in another year, there'll be better history and trends that when we do the budgeting, we can look at it that way.
I think that's the key. If we have good history, then it's a lot easier to budget, in the right place to begin with. So I guess the short answer is we expect it's going to get better as we go forward, as we get more actual history that we can rely on for the budget going forward.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So how often do you look at these transfers? Like on a monthly basis, weekly, when you're looking at these numbers and things change?
We're looking at them more or less continuously, certainly on a weekly basis. to see where we are and you know, where we may need to move money around as we, you know, especially as we get toward the end of the year, it gets tighter because then there's less, you know, ability to kind of cover things without getting transfers processed. So, you know, so I would say certainly as we're now into May and into June, we're looking at this really on almost a daily basis. At the beginning of the year, not as much. At the beginning of the year, you know, it might be, you know, we're looking at it sort of on a every other week sort of basis. But as we get into May and June, we have to kind of stay on top of this. So.
Right, and it makes the year-end close a lot cleaner and easier if we do these as we go along. So you'll see more and more. And actually, a quirky thing about this is these budget transfers are like part 1 of 2 because of the date of the board meeting, the way it falls. We're gonna have another finance committee meeting, I think, before we have the board meeting to approve these, right? Am I thinking about that correctly?
Oh, that
I
may be
think
true because in May we had the business meeting.
Right, they got-
we had
the
a flip
business
flop.
meeting. So you're right. There will be another set of transfers before they get approved by the board.
Right, so we'll have this piece, so we figured we'd talk about half of them, and then we'll bring you another half, and then the whole thing will go to the board. So just wanted to bring
Okay.
that.
Ideally, the advantage to getting these transfers done as we go along is it means we don't have as much cleanup to do at the end of the year, and you don't have this enormous list of transfers coming to you in June or July, cleaning everything up. So, but I'm sure there still will be a lot of year-end cleanup transfers because there always are. But if the bigger ones are taken care of early, that helps. So.
Well, thank you. We'll do what we can to make that year-end cleanup a little easier. Are there any other questions or comments on the transfers? If not, we can go straight to the next item on the agenda, which is speaking of swapped meetings. We weren't able to look at these this April report at our last board meeting. So now we're going to take a look at it here.
Right. So
a vacation every now and then. I don't know.
Okay, so this is the April financial report. So we're 83% through the fiscal year and 80% through the school year. And bottom line is everything is really about where we would expect it. Looks like I'm missing the first page on this.
Is it at the end, maybe?
Oh, maybe. Let's see.
It's at the end.
I bet it's at the end. Yeah. Okay. So here's the summary, and the summary shows we've spent here $147.7 million, or about 71% of our budget, and there's really nothing extraordinary to report. Frankly, everything is more or less tracking about where we would expect it to track. We're a bit above where we were at the same time last year, about 1.8% higher than where we were last year, which is to be expected. I'll go back up to let's see. I go back up to the 100 series account, which are salaries. There's, again, nothing extraordinary to report here. Teacher salaries running at about 71%. We will, many of the teachers do elect to get paid over 12 months. So the number runs a little low because of the fact that some of their salary is really deferred, if you will, until the July and August payments are made, but those are booked back to the old year because they're for services that are rendered in the current year. And the other wage accounts, again, look very much in line with where we would expect them. We do run projections, and we're expecting our wage accounts to come in on budget or slightly under budget, but not by an extraordinary amount. So we're pretty much right on target on wages. The 200 series of objects are the benefit accounts, the biggest of which is health benefits here. And this is our contribution to the insurance fund. We've made contributions equal to 68% of the total budget at this point, and that will be fully expended by year end. Retirement benefit account is running higher than normal, having spent now $1,072,000 out of our budget of almost 1.6 million. So it is significantly higher than last year, although what seems to have happened this year is a number of employees left during the course of the year, as opposed to waiting until June. A number of people left in December, or in some cases before December. So based on our projected retirees in June, we believe we're going to be about on budget. And if we are slightly over budget here, we will have enough money in the wage accounts to cover any amount that we need in that account. So we're expecting to be in good shape there. Longevity has been essentially fully expended, but that is expected at this point during the year because the longevity payments have been made. Social Security is running pretty much on budget. Unemployment, we've had some transfers that you've approved into the unemployment budget, including transfers that were on tonight's agenda. So that has been running a bit high because of COVID. And the explanation there is that some of the folks, the way unemployment works is some of our part-time people, even though we haven't laid them off, they may have been laid off from other jobs that they have, and that has an impact on our unemployment exposure. Hopefully, as the pandemic, gets behind us, that we'll start to see this come down going forward. Although, we're not 100% sure because of the fact that we also have some folks who were brought on this school year to address, COVID issues and distancing and so forth. So there could be some lingering impact on unemployment expense going into next year as well. The 300 series accounts are professional and technical services. And again, nothing really extraordinary here. The 330 account here is the largest of the accounts within this category. We've spent 61% of the budget, or $4.7 million there. So we're, pretty much on budget, or perhaps running a little below budget at this point in that account. Property services are also running pretty much on budget at about 73% total expended at this point in property services. The biggest item here is the 400 account, which is for the outsourced custodial services, is the primary item there. And the repair and maintenance, the 430 account, you'll see we're 75% expended there, which is one of the main facilities accounts. So there's really nothing unusual going on in the 400 series. In the 500 series, the two big items here in the 500 series are transportation, which is running a bit low, and that's because of the fact that we have reduced our number of buses that are required in the COVID environment that we're presently in. So we do expect to have some savings in transportation. And the other major account here is out-of-district tuition. And we've spent 63% of the budget, which is about where we expected to be at this point during the year. And so those accounts are looking to be fine. And the 600 series accounts, the supply accounts, these have picked up a little bit since last month. There has been a number of items that have been purchased, and but overall the supply accounts are in decent shape. We're running, I think it's 62%, I believe, is 62.3% overall spending in the supply accounts. We talked about the utility accounts earlier are in this category, and we've transferred some money into a few of those accounts. And you see instructional supplies, schools are spending those funds now at this point. So I do expect we'll mostly expend these supply accounts by year end. And the equipment accounts, the 700 series, are also, the schools are spending these accounts. I know at this point we've moved some money into a number of the equipment accounts, and there's a number of orders that are outstanding. So I expect that we're going to see those expenses by June 30th come up to budget. And the last series of accounts is the 800 and series of accounts, which are really minor. So that is about it for the financial report. I don't know if there's any questions on any specific accounts or any general questions.
On the 900 series, which I guess is really about the COVID-19 expenses.
That is, we're really not charging anything here. I think what was charged here in error and should have gone to one of our grants, probably the ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 grant. And so this negative number you see is us journal entering some expenses that were charged here in error out to those grants. There's still apparently $33,000 that we need to find a home for, and I think it's probably the ESSER 2 grant that we have to journal entry that to the correct place, the correct grant fund. We had originally set up this account. We should probably disable it at this point. We had originally set this up back last spring, not quite sure what to do and what was going to happen, but knowing that we were going to have some extraordinary expenses, and we didn't want to charge them just to a regular departmental budget line. So we set up this 912 account for COVID. And, I think there were some items that in the early part of the fiscal year were charged here that need to be still moved off to a grant fund.
Okay, that is very helpful. So, the reason I was asking, because my assumption is that all these extra COVID expenses are baked into these existing accounts, right? So we have to spend extra on some IT expenses, because of COVID, and that's reflected in those accounts.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if we have to spend something extra because of COVID, our policy has been that we're going to use the special grant funds that were appropriated for that purpose. So we've got, ESSER 2 money, we've got ESSER 3 money now that's becoming available. So, we've got places to charge our COVID expenses, certainly. So,
is there a way, if somebody wanted to find an accounting of the extra money we had to spend specifically because of COVID, whether it's on PPE or different kinds of mitigations required by social distancing, if we wanted to find what was the total financial impact of COVID on this particular school year, And the reason I ask is that I know that our 2021-22 budget did not factor in extra COVID expenses because we were anticipating federal and state aid for that. Do we have that kind of insight?
Yes, we
Yeah.
do have that information. It's in a few different places. The CRF grant, the COVID Relief Fund grant, was one of the primary sources that we used to cover expenses, but those could only be for expenses that were incurred through December 31st of 2020. And so that was the primary account, and we can provide you with information on what those expenses were. And then ESSER 2 is the follow-on grant that's been available that we've been using for the second half of this year. I'm looking to Kristen. Was there anything that we specifically left in the local budget and said, well, we're leaving this in the local budget? I don't remember.
I think if we took all the grants that were allocated for COVID reasons, you can get an idea of what the cost of COVID was. The CRF grant, as you mentioned, there's ESSER 1 was more academic, related to the Title I schools, and then ESSER 2, and then ESSER 3 is coming. But
Right.
The actual expenditures for this year, once they're filed and the time period has passed up to the year end and we submitted all that, we can actually pull from those munis accounts once
Right.
it's all,
We are still completing the filing on the CRF grant. So not everything, even though we can't file for expenses that were incurred prior to or that were incurred after December 30th, it's been a rather tedious task to sort of tease out and submit it. So we actually had to bring in some part-time staff to help do that, because some of it is related to a lot of it is related to staffing. The extra hours that we needed to have a paraprofessional in the building because of the fact that they were staffing a classroom, and they may have originally been budgeted in our local budget as a 27.5-hour a week employee, but we moved them up to 35 hours a week because that's what they were needed in the building to cover the the classrooms. But then it means having to go, what we had to do is go back through individual pay records week by week and pull that out. So that's what we've done. But there may be, some other items that the staff is still working on that relate to closing out that CRF grant. But the answer is yes, we will be able to give you a breakdown of how much money we spent. We can certainly give you a pretty accurate estimate, now. And the final number, I believe the CRF grant that you can actually continue to file up until, do you know, is it September, Kristen, or do I have that wrong? I'm not sure, but it's.
I think the final fund drawdown is approaching for CRF.
Yeah, I think the final fund drawdown for this year is approaching.
Mhm.
And then there's an issue raised about, well, I think the state will still let you draw down after June 30th. But then the question becomes how your auditors are going to deal with that, because it does create then a complicating issue for the auditors. If you've got something recorded against the old fiscal year, but you then, are getting reimbursed for it, or, that it's being charged off to CRF after in the new fiscal year, how the auditors will handle that. So ideally, we would have everything all cleaned up and done before June 30th. So.
And no, I appreciate that. And I think, understanding that it'll take some sort of drilling down to some of those nuts and bolts, total details. And the only reason I ask is that I want to make sure that we're being transparent and clear about the fact that even though we're using some of this ESSER 3 funding to plug some of our operating budget holes, we are not yet at this particular moment clear about what kind of COVID mitigations may be either required or necessary in the fall. And so we have to be aware of that, because
Yeah,
that's,
I think that's definitely a very good point, because
Yeah.
we don't know what the local health director and the district medical director may advise or require. We know what the CDC guidance is and so forth, but
and that guidance may change.
And that guidance may change. It may.
Right. And even regardless of the guidance, I think that as we talked about with teams earlier and some of those school budget meetings, we may want to, as a district, explore some of the ways we can continue, even if it's not in the same scale, options for some of our students with a variety of mitigating factors who may need to learn remotely or otherwise require some kind of, non-traditional instruction. And I think that, we want to just keep that in mind.
Yep.
So, okay, that's very helpful. Any other questions or comments on the financial report? Okay.
Well,
thank you as always. Thank you as always to Tom and to Kristen for helping us make sense of these numbers. The next item in our agenda is public comments, which we did not receive any via email. And I don't believe we have anyone logged on currently. Roland, you can fact check me.
No, sir. Only the participants we see on the screen are there.
Okay. Well, in that case, we've come to the end of our agenda. Thanks again for the continuing work to make this make financial sense of this whole thing. And I will now welcome one final motion from either Suzanne or Diana. Suzanne.
I move to end this informative meeting.
Motion to adjourn, seconded by Diana. All in favor? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for a good evening.